Right now, at this exact second, there is a sprawling, incredibly high-stakes, microscopic battlefield raging right inside your bloodstream. We are talking about a literal war zone involving billions of cells. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive, game-changing shift in oncology. We're moving away from the old paradigms and looking at how we can actually unmask cancer using the body's very own biological intelligence. We're talking about immunotherapy. But before we get to the amazing solutions, you really have to ask yourself a critical question. Why on earth does the human body just ignore its deadliest enemy? I mean, if our immune system is so advanced and so fiercely protective against viruses and bacteria, how does a tumor manage to set up camp without tripping every single alarm bell in the building? Well, the answer lies in cancer's terrifying stealth capabilities.
All right, Section 1, the brute force problem.
Okay, let's dive into this by looking at how we've traditionally fought this war. For decades, the whole oncology playbook was basically based on a doctrine of external brute force. Think about traditional chemotherapy and radiation. They use this outside-in logic, essentially acting as a carpet bombing campaign designed to just poison or burn any fast-growing cell they stumble across. But now, a totally new paradigm is emerging, one based on internal biological intelligence, working from the inside out. And we desperately need this new internal approach because of one massive hurdle, and that's broad toxicity. The thing is, traditional therapies just can't tell the difference between a dangerous, malignant tumor and the totally healthy, rapidly dividing cells in your hair follicles or your stomach lining. So we're basically forced to drop external poisons onto our own biology.
Moving right along to Section 2, cancer's secret invisibility shield.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how deceptive cancer actually is. Because cancer originates from our own healthy tissue, it plays a really dirty trick. You know your body maintains this standing army of immune cells, right? They're called T cells, and they're constantly patrolling your bloodstream, scanning for anything weird. But tumors express this specific surface protein called PD-L1, and it completely neutralizes that army. Think of PD-L1 as this really deceptive chemical handshake. When one of your immune cells approaches, the cancer transfers a false signal, literally telling the T cell to just stand down and ignore it. It conjures up an invisibility shield right out of thin air, so the tumor just blends seamlessly into the body's natural landscape. No alarms, nothing.
Which brings us to Section 3, executing a biochemical intercept. So we know the shield is there, right? But how do we break it? We have to expose that tumor using a highly deliberate, tactical clinical solution. Immunotherapy totally bypasses the need to pump up external drug toxicity. Instead, it focuses completely on the patient's own biology to pull off a biochemical intercept. In the real world, it looks like this. First, oncologists run biomarker tests on the tumor profile to pinpoint that exact false signal. They're looking specifically for elevated levels of that PD-L1 protein. Second, using that exact genetic data, doctors select a highly precise immunotherapy drug and map out the dosage. And finally, they administer it through an IV in the hospital. This whole diagnostic process, it's basically a deliberate mapping of the tumor's secret communications. Then, once that drug hits the bloodstream via the IV and finally reaches the tumor, we get what's called a checkpoint blockade. These specific drug molecules literally act like microscopic physical wedges. They cap the PD-L1 receptors right on the cancer cell, acting as this hyper-specialized information filter that completely jams that deceptive chemical handshake we just talked about. And that launches us into Section 4, the weaponized immune response. This is absolutely the most action-packed phase of the entire process, the tactical strike. With those receptors capped, the false signal is officially jammed. The shield drops. Suddenly, an approaching T cell attempts its little handshake, but the connection fails. The T cell instantly realizes it's been duped, leaving it highly agitated and suddenly face-to-face with a rogue cell. Without that camouflage, the standing army instantly locks onto the targeted mass. These newly activated, totally weaponized T cells immediately kick off a violent response. They start injecting highly toxic proteins, specifically perforin and granzymes, directly into the newly unmasked cancer cells. Down on a microscopic level, these proteins are just absolutely devastating to the tumor. They go straight to work, literally shredding the cancer cell's DNA. It is a process of sheer, ruthless efficiency, completely dismantling the cell's core from the inside out. So the crucial point here is that this hyper-targeted execution forces the tumor into apoptosis, which is just the scientific term for programmed systematic cell death. By simply removing the camouflage, a fully informed immune system proves to be the most efficient, ruthless killer of cancer imaginable. Now, we need to be realistic here. Section 5, the cost of overdrive. As incredibly effective as this all is, we really have to look at the whole picture. Deliberately awakening the immune system like this carries a very real physical cost. Pushing the system into absolute overdrive creates systemic zones of inflammation. If you look at clinical vector maps, this hits major areas like the lungs, the skin, and the digestive tract, which causes intense side effects like profound fatigue and organ swelling. But it is so vital to understand why this is happening. The source material describes these reactions perfectly as the friction of a hyperactivated internal defense network. This biological friction is entirely different from the totally indiscriminate cellular death and widespread damage caused by traditional therapies. What you're feeling is literally the heat of your own internal engine running at maximum capacity to save your life. Let's move to Section 6 and see how this builds permanent immune memory.
Because once those T cells dismantle the cancer, their mission isn't over, not even close. They build a biological archive. They take the tumor's unique biological signature and permanently encode it right into their memory banks. This is an incredible long-term advantage that external chemical drugs can literally never replicate.
And why is that such a game changer? It means that if that specific cancer ever attempts to return, your body's biological intelligence already possesses the exact data it needs to recognize it instantly. It guarantees instant destruction upon return without needing any further external intervention. Your standing army is already briefed, armed, and waiting. Which really leaves us with a wild thought to ponder. Has the ultimate cure always been hiding right there within our own cells, just waiting for the right data? By transitioning away from an external chemical battle and instead mobilizing our own biological intelligence, we are leveraging a defense system that has quite literally been with us all along. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.